When we went into this COVID environment, everyone had to change everything that they do.
So I just want to start by saying that you have shared with me the importance of knowing your institution and knowing your institution really well.
Mhm.
But I'm just wondering if you can tell us a bit more about what you mean by that. What does it mean to know your institution?
Mhm.
And how did you get to know your institution?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for asking this question. I think to me, it's intriguing. It's really a good question, right? Whether you are brand new in an institution, and usually that's where people are when they're trying to figure these things out, right? Or even if you've been in an institution for a long time, but you're trying to accomplish, some major change or something like that, an organizational or a structural change. So I think that, it's super, super important as you go into a new role. Usually you have these objectives, you have a charge that you're given, you have this job description. And so you feel like, hey, I've been working in higher education somewhere for a long time. I know what I'm doing. Here's my charge at this new place. And I'm going to get in there and I'm just going to, start making it happen. And so, I think that every single institution has a really different culture, any group has a culture. And so I think it's really, really critical, right? Even if you know ultimately what's going to happen, regardless of, who says what, it's really, really important to get a feel for how things work at the place that you are in. So I work at a community college. If you're coming to my school, the most important thing is to make sure that you talk to people, kind of get a feel for what their ideas are, what their opinions are about things. What do they think are strengths and weaknesses of the school? What do they think would be high priorities? And really just having conversations with people and listening to what they have to say and getting input. It's really, really critical because you'll start to understand, you'll see things surface and you'll start to understand, what really you'll find a string, you know what I mean, that comes around through with everyone. Here's things that work really well. Here's things that don't work well. But they want to be asked. And it's really, really important to kind of go through that and understand what the structure is, who seems to be making decisions, things like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And thank you for sharing that you mentioned about the culture. And that is so
Yep.
true about different colleges and
Mhm.
everybody having their own culture. I know I've worked at many colleges, some in Maryland, California, North
Yeah.
Carolina, and where I'm at now in Colorado. And you're so right that they are different cultures because they're
Right.
different people and things like that. So I appreciate you mentioned that key point about the culture
Mhm.
and your experiences at the community college because we have so many people sometimes just think about the four-year college, but I like how you have that perspective of the community college because it is a little bit different. So I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So thank you for bringing that
Yeah.
up. Really,
Sure.
really good experience. I just wanted to talk about change a little bit because we do talk about change and the differences change can have on people and our circumstances and what change can mean. So change is certain. We know that change is going
Mhm.
to happen. This is part of life. You can't get around that.
Right.
But also with change, there's some challenges you have in higher education. And some people adapt to change and some people don't.
Mhm.
So we're thinking about change and the challenge in higher education. Institution can turn away from what you are hired to do. You talked about that. Sometimes you start at a college and you have a favorite initiative, um, and it can change away from what you wanted to work on and why you were hired. But change happens. Like we talked
Yep.
about a little bit later, COVID-19 that changed a lot of colleges and things like that. So when your institution turn away from if you have a favorite initiative and you feel unprepared for the new priorities, can you tell us how to help people to manage the need to adapt to changing priorities? Like I said, I mentioned some of the changes at my colleges, and sometimes those changes are out of your control. They can come from a higher level. It could be the
Yep.
president, the VP, the provost, or whoever say, guess what? This is a new initiative. This is direction we want to go in. And you don't have control to go back and say, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I don't want to be part of all that. So what can we do? Do you have any suggestions on how people can adapt to these new priorities?
Mhm. This is going to sound so simple and so overly simplified, but just understanding, that change is going to happen and it's not personal, right? So keeping in the forefront of your mind, I think that the strategic priorities in an institution are happening, at many levels, right? They're going to shift, and then it's our job to support those priorities. And so things can change very quickly, and you're going to, be moving in one direction, and then all of a sudden, your provost or your vice president or whoever it is going to say, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. This is what we need to do. And you have to realize, okay, this is what happens. This is to advance the institution. This is to support our students, whatever is happening, with our student population. And then, you have to move forward and figure out how to make those things happen. So I think, it's really simple, but you just have to talk to people. You have to tell them this is not personal. We can't take it personally. This is just what we need to work through at this point. So, it can mean that their job could shift a little bit. It could change what they're doing, could shift a little bit. And those things can be really stressful for people. And so I think just being open and honest about what's happening and why, and just having conversations over and over again, with whoever the key players would be, other offices, your own staff, and just talking to them about why these things might be happening is really the key. If they've heard you talk about it, then they're going to trust you. They're not going to feel blindsided. Maybe they don't like it, but they're going to understand why it's happening.
Great, thank you. Like you said,
Mhm.
it's going to happen, and it's good
Right,
to adapt. And yeah, it's good to adapt to
right,
these changes. Thank you.
right. And not fretting about how it's going to impact you directly, but understanding and trusting, this is going to be okay. It's not about us. It's about how are we going to best serve our students.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I like how you said about not making it personal. Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do, though, because it is personal to us, right?
That is true.
Yeah.
exactly. And Candace, so it's intriguing because you've given a similar strategy for both questions. How do you get to know your institution? You get to know your institution by asking people about their concerns about it and what they see. You get to deal with change and adapting to change by asking people and talking to people in depth about the oncoming change. So this notion of communication as something that's both time consuming and but key. So I appreciate that,
Yeah.
and thank you for
Communication is
that. Do
so
you want?
important, and people want to be heard. They want to be listened to. We all like to talk about ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, if it's personal, if it's at work, whatever. People want to be heard. They want to talk about themselves,
Yeah.
and they want to have a voice. And so, if they have that voice, then they're going to be more receptive.
That's so.
Simple.
It's yeah. Huh. Thank you for that. So I want to switch gears a little bit
Sure.
and talk about passion.
Yeah.
So you are a person with great passion. I've heard it over the years for the students you serve. And how do you harness that? How do you use your passion to keep focused?
So it's so easy to get overwhelmed and bogged down in the different details of what you're doing every single day in your job, right? So for me, I'm working with students directly. I'm moving things forward with priorities. I'm making sure that my staff understand what they need to be dealing with at any given time, because there's key times, the priorities shift depending on the time in the year. So right now we're starting registration for the summer and the fall, and that's a really big thing. So as we make decisions, I think it gets really difficult sometimes to know what to focus your attention on, because we have many, many things that are competing with, against us, with our areas, with your own workload, things like that. And so sometimes decisions can be very, very difficult to make, right? Because you have so many different things that you need to be looking at. And so I think what I have always done is really try to remember what the objective is, and it's to serve the students, right? So we're trying to make sure that any decision that we make is going to be the right decision for students. I'm here to help students. That's why I got into this field. That's why most of us get into this field, right? Because they want to make sure that students are having a really wonderful experience wherever they are in their educational path. And so I can get overwhelmed myself when trying to make, organizational shifts in my office, changing people's workloads and things like that, working with other areas. And so I can get kind of paralyzed in making decisions until I really think about what is actually best for the students. And so when I think about what's best for the students, it takes all those external, stressors and worries right out of it, so then those just kind of go away, and then it's easy to make a decision. In our heart of hearts, we always know what is the best thing for the student, right? So when you take all those other pieces that are kind of like just noise away from what you're trying to decide to do, it makes it very clear, if that makes sense, just really always thinking about what is actually best for the student, not what's best for me, not as what is best for necessarily the staff, but what is going to help the students the most. And that's how I really try to make all decisions, focus in on the decisions, and that I can feel really good about what we're going to do, because it's the right thing.
Mhm. And you're right, the success of the students is the key. And I just want to go back to one or two things that you mentioned. I
Sure.
thought was so interesting.
Sure.
You had mentioned about people wanted to be heard and listened to. And I just remember before COVID-19, Oprah did a vision tour in different cities and different states. And I went to one that she did in North Carolina, and it was so interesting. She said on stage, back when we can have a lot of people in the audience, like 15,000 of us. You can't have 15,000 now with COVID in one
Right.
place, but before everything hit, it's about 15,000 of us, and she was talking on stage, and she said after 25 years of doing her show, she said from presidents to people in the community, the common thing that she heard them say over and over again is, do you think somebody listened to me? Do you think I was
Mhm.
heard? And that seemed to be the common thing. People want to be heard and listened to.